Okay.
Hey, I'm Joel Blackstock with Taproot Therapy Collective, and I'm here with Diana and Jay from Peak Neuroscience to talk about their brain mapping and neurostimulation, which treats a wide variety of stuff. Can you show us like the what do you call that?
The EEG cap.
That's the EEG cap. So when that goes on my head, the computer will recognize it as an external storage device and will run Windows Disk Fragmenter. Is that how it works?
Yeah, we put these electrodes on top of the skin in the head, and then it very gently records, or we put some gel in it, and it records the EEG, different areas of the brain.
So you guys have a proprietary technology you're like building that can tell the difference between different diagnoses by mapping what's going on in the brain and then telling you exactly what is something that's an issue.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, we can tell a lot from your EEG. If you're not sleeping well, we can tell. If you're stressed, we can tell.
Cool.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through some of the brain maps and like how that stuff shows up in the computer?
Sure. So this is my own brain map, and Jay is gonna go ahead and explain it as if it was the first time that I'm seeing my brain map.
Well, great. Yes, this is the summary page. And so when we meet with families, meet with individuals about the outcome of their quantitative EEG measurements, call them cues. They kind of roll up our tongue. We call them cues. They're actual quantitative EEGs. People call them brain maps. And this is the summary page, one page out of many that would go into the hard copy outcome measure. That comes from one of these brain mapping sessions. And this tells a lot about what the brain is doing in real time. When we talk about imaging, there's a lot of good imaging techniques out there, and each technique is really good at a certain aspect of what it's communicating about the brain. MRI, fMRI, SPECT scans. There's a lot of different ways to image the brain. EEG is probably one of the best techniques going that shows what the brain does in real time. It doesn't necessarily tell you a lot about well, maybe just for this conversation, maybe edit that. I'm going to test your editing skills out, Joel. But these brain maps tell us in a lot of specificity about where something is happening and exactly in real time when it's taking place. And you get a lot of this information really quickly. The whole brain mapping process takes maybe 20 minutes, a couple minutes to put the cap on. That will show, and then you typically do a 5-minute measure with the eyes open, and a 5-minute measure with the eyes closed. Some people like to do 10 minutes in both conditions, eyes open, eyes closed. But you really need good 5 minutes eyes open, 5 minutes eyes closed, and you get a lot of information about what the brain's doing. So what we're looking at here as the summary page, you see, just looking at this top row here, we see a row of heads. This top row we call absolute power. This is the individual as compared to a control sample. And so this is matched for gender and age. So for any person, all of this, the entire page is this individual. Just this top row that we'll talk about first, this is the person's brain as compared to a control sample. So just average individuals of their gender and their age, just people who are not diagnosable with X, Y, or Z, just kind of average folks. And so we see 5 different heads here, and these labels for the different heads. What we're looking at here is how much of different firing speeds is the brain generating at that time. So if you were to look at the EEG, this is the quantified version after we do the analysis, and we quantify how much delta activity is in the mix, how much theta activity is in the mix. And so I want to explain what all that means. But if you were looking at the raw EEG, just a bunch of lines going across the screen is the raw EEG, it would have different speeds, different firing speeds in that mix. And so when we create these brain maps, you get to see exactly how much slow activity is the brain generating, how much mid-range, mid-firing speed is the brain generating, how much fast activity is the brain generating. And this tells us a lot about how the person's feeling, how they're sleeping, what their quality of thought, what their mental vigilance is like, a lot. So let me just define what these different heads are purporting to us. And this will kind of pop some things into good view. So all this is happening simultaneously. The brain's generating very slow brain waves, very fast brain waves. All this is happening simultaneously, and you need them all. They're all necessary. Now they each do different things. They're indicating that various kinds of cognitive, brain activities are going on, and they're all needed. But they all tell you about its own kind of brain function. For instance, delta. This is the slowest brain wave that the brain generates. It's between 1 and 4 hertz, or 1 and 4 cycles per second. That's not really necessary for the layperson, but it's a really slow brain wave that's coming off the top of your head. I didn't say that when I first started talking, but we each have these brain waves coming off of our scalp. It's electricity that the brain is generating. Whenever the brain does anything, which is all the time, the brain's generating this electricity. And it comes off the head, comes off the scalp. We call them brain waves, but it's just electricity coming from the brain. And when you can capture that, when you put some sensors on the scalp, on the outside of the head, and you measure the electrical current from the brain, giving nothing to the body, just simply measuring what's coming off the head, in the form of these brain waves, then you can see what the brain is doing. So delta, that's a slow firing speed. It's a slow brain wave, which tends to tell us about what the person is like in terms of sleep. When delta is a little bit underpowered, when the brain's not generating enough of that delta speed, then usually sleep is an issue. Usually there's not a lot of groundedness, a lot of peace going on about the person when delta is in light supply. But usually when delta is pretty strong, then sleep is usually okay, unless there's some other things going on. Then we move on and we talk about theta, a little bit of a faster waveform, faster firing speed that the brain is going through. Theta is probably the most complex out of the 5 different firing speeds. Theta can mean different things. Usually, theta is a marker of introspection, kind of self-monitoring. You're third person, and you're sort of looking at self. You walk into a room and you think, what do those guys think about me over there? Or you're kind of monitoring how you're feeling, self-monitoring your behavior, monitoring your own thoughts, which is. I'm sorry?
You hire like an introverted person, something that's an internal process.
That's right. People who meditate can get into theta states really, really fast. Theta can be very good for that. But you don't want to have too much theta. You don't want to have too much of any one firing speed, because there needs to be a good balance. I don't want to say that word balance too much. It sounds I want to say things that are meaningful, but you want to be balanced. Think of these as like 5 glasses of water, and you want them to be kind of the same all the way across. It's usually how a person feels the best. They feel the most regulated. But yeah, when there's a lot of theta being generated, then that can prompt a person to feel kind of on stage, maybe trapped inside your own head, really self-conscious. People with some anxiety about them, it can arise from having too much of this data. Just a lot of self-monitoring. You're just trapped in your head, and it's hard to stop thinking about things. You sort of get on that merry-go-round. It's hard to stop thinking about something when there's a lot of theta being made. But theta doesn't have to mean that. Theta can also be a marker of just more of a straightforward mental slowing, like difficulty getting it in gear. When you're trying to do some work, you're trying to study, you're trying to work, you're trying to concentrate at your work. Having a lot of theta can make it difficult to get down to business, like when you're trying to actually do something executive, you're trying to do your work. Theta makes everything feel like it's an effort. It's hard to get it in gear. So you would need to do a clinical interview, do a really good interview with a person to make accurate interpretations as to what's happening with a person. It's a mistake when people just take a brain map and don't get to know the person very well. So you can't simply go by the numbers. You have to combine our knowledge of an individual with the brain numbers and what's happening neurologically to get an accurate picture. Alpha, a little bit faster of a waveform. Think of alpha as a person's idle. So if you get in the car and you crank the engine and just the engine's just being default, it's just being an engine. So we're just being us. So think of alpha as being a person's relaxed attention. So what kind of cues are you catching when you're not explicitly trying to be on task? You're just kind of bebopping through the house, or you're sipping coffee at the dinner table. You're not trying to be on task. So what are you catching when you're not on? That's a lot of what alpha tells us. It's not just your idle. It's more complex. All of this is more complex than what I'm saying. But just speaking in generalities, think of alpha as your idle, and what kinds of cues are you catching when you're not explicitly trying to catch cue? Beta. Now we're getting into some faster wave. Beta is very important because this is usually the firing speed that's reflective of your executive functionality. So this is when a person is on task. This is what makes you a good employee, a good thinker, makes you a good student. So if your brain is not making a lot of this beta, a lot of this faster activity, it's going to be hard to think, and you're going to need some brain breaks, maybe quicker than your peers will need some breaks, and you'll just spend your brain fuel, all that glucose, all that oxygen, all that ATP, all that brain fuel stuff. You can just burn through that, and you can be spent, and you need a break. When beta is a little bit underpowered with a person. And then high beta, really fast wave activity. High beta is usually not redemptive for a lot. You don't need it for a lot. When there's a lot of high beta being generated, and you capture it in a brain map like this, if there's a lot of high beta, usually that's a marker of the brain trying to contend with stress from some source, maybe some anxiety going on, or some generalized inflammation. When there's some GI, when there's some inflammation in your GI, which for a lot of us Americans, that's a lot of this. It's just always been there, and we think it's normal, and we don't. It doesn't really call attention to itself. But when there's some inflammatory stuff going on, then you can capture that in a QEEG, and it looks like a little red circle, like a little red. Just like a little red circle here, and that's one interpretation, one possible cause for a lot of high beta. And Joel, I just got a notification that this Zoom's going to stop in 10 minutes. I don't know why I got that with this just being two people. It should be unlimited, shouldn't it? But anyway, it's going to cut me off here in 10 minutes.
Okay. Do you need much longer than that, do you think? Or would we be wrapping it up in 10 minutes and we could start a new video?
I couldn't hear you quite. Well, and what'd you say?
Even longer than 10 minutes to go through the information?
Let's see. How long? I don't know if I'm being too wordy. If you're going to cut most of this out, or if I with this, so I don't know. So to say about Deanna's map, what I want to say would probably for the sake of a clickable video, yeah, I think 10 minutes would suffice.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
These feel like I think is helpful for people to engage with the information.
Okay. Okay. So looking at this balance here from delta all the way to high beta, so we see a lot of red, orangish color here in the theta head. So this is telling us that there's a lot of that activity, a lot of that theta firing speed being generated by this individual. You tend to want to be somewhere -1 to 1 on this legend. So the colors don't mean good versus bad. They just tell you how much of something. And then once you see how much of something is there, then you interpret, okay, is this a gift? I mean, it's certainly a deviation from what's typical, but that could be a good deviation. That could be a superpower. That could be something that's really good, or it could represent a challenge to be overcome. So looking at this map, I would say there's a lot of this slower wave activity being generated. And so I would wonder, like if I didn't know this person, I would wonder, okay, how well are they able to concentrate, and how long are they able to concentrate before they would need a brain break, as I call them, just kind of splash water in the face and come back and hit it again. Or I would wonder, is there some possible anxiety going on? Because this looks like a person could be trapped in their head, just thinking things to death and difficult, letting things go. They just want to think about something until it is solved. And sometimes things are not always solvable right there in the moment. And so there's just not a comfort level. They're not ready to stop thinking about it. So the brain doesn't want to let them go. So I would think about asking this individual, is it more of kind of an ADHD type concentration issue? Or is this more of I'm trapped in my head and I can't stop thinking about things type issue? Or really what's going on? So I guess that will be my first wave of going through this data with a client, with a client's family. There's a lot here, and I've not addressed the other rows here. They're very important. But just looking at that top row, we know a lot just by looking at it, and then I would want to engage in a conversation. It's very collegial. It's a conversation when we go through these maps with individuals. And I will say this: when we go through these maps with individuals, oftentimes the experience that they have, but that the individual has, it tends to let a person off the hook. It tends to relieve them, no matter what they see, no matter what we're talking about or what the issues seem to be. It seems to be relieving in that there's some corroboration as to what their experiences have been. Like, I'm not making this up. There it is. I'm not being silly. I'm not being weak. There's a neurological reason why my sleep isn't good, or why I find it hard to get off that thought merry-go-round, or I knew I wasn't just making this up as to why I have a hard time concentrating, or why my mood is so low, or why I get so agitated without a lot of provocation. So it tends to be cathartic, kind of stress valve releasing when a person sees their brain, and knowing that they're about to hear from us that all of this is changeable. This is the balance right now, but the brain is so incredibly plastic. When we say plastic, we mean changeable. All of this is changeable, and we can help the brain learn more adaptive routines to help the person feel like themselves again, and function at a higher level, like they probably knew themselves to function back at once upon a time. That there's something that can be done about how they're feeling, and things things can be improved upon.
Sounds like some of the different brain states could correspond to thought functions on the Myers-Briggs type indicator, that you have introverted intuition or extroverted sensing and thinking, and you can see some overlap in those. And just like what you're saying with the brain map, you don't want any of those to be too high. You kind of want to have balance. You want to be able to think flexibly, to switch in between different modes of thinking.
Exactly. And when you look at the relative power, here you're not being compared to anybody else. Like you're being compared to a normal sample in this top row. This second row here, you're not being compared to anybody else. It's just your relative balance of your brain. And so talk about different brain states, like you're saying, different functionality domains. Take a look at this beta and high beta. It looks cold, it looks awfully blue, like there's not enough of it. It's not cold, because look at the norms. You look at the beta and the high beta, it's quite green, which according to this legend, that's average. That's what you would expect to see. But they look blue relatively, just because relative to the other firing speeds, this shows the dominance of how much alpha and beta that the person's brain is making. So you can look at what your brain is motivated to do. This person's brain is motivated to generate a lot of the alpha and the beta at the expense of this restful, peaceful delta, and at the expense of this highly functional beta.
So you're saying that averages kind of go two directions. One is that your average compared to the normal population of people, and the other is your average compared to your own brain state.
So because the brain only has so much energy to spend. So let's say you have $10 of energy to spend daily. Then what is your brain gonna use it for? Is it gonna put it on delta, theta, alpha, beta, whatever? So for example, my brain there, it's using most of its money right here, and it's borrowing from the other sides to be able to produce those waves.
So I would assume that trauma or stress or dysregulation would make the brain more fragmented, that you would see all of the chips being put on red and none of the chips being put on black.
Exactly. So that's what we would talk about first as we're sitting down talking with an individual about their brain map. We would also talk about coherence and phase, and we probably don't have a lot of time to talk about that. There's a lot. This is just a high level, but there's a lot of information as to what the efficiency of processing is like. How much energy is the brain spending to process information that you're seeing and reading and hearing. That's where the conversation begins, talking about how much activity, how much firing speed is being exhibited by the brain, and how is that helping and or hurting a person as they're going about their daily activities.
Well, that sounds great. That's really interesting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jay.
You're welcome.
So if people want to find you on the internet, where is it that they can look you up or get services in Texas or in Alabama?
Cool.
Peakneuroscience.com.
Peakneuroscience.com? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you. It looks like we got 1 minute left on the Zoom thing.
Yeah.
I guess.
Alright, so I want to talk about my own experience. I was diagnosed with ADHD actually being an adult, and I have been working with EEG for the last 5 years. So when I saw my own, first time I have done my own EEG, I saw this lots of theta, and then also saw this underpowered beta here. And I knew that is a marker for inattentive type of ADHD. So I actually went and did a test and got diagnosed and I didn't know I had ADHD because I didn't know there was an inattentive type until fairly recently. And I thought that ADHD was, the hyperactive type, which is the most common one that you see getting diagnosed. And actually, a lot of women that have ADHD tend to have more the inattentive type. So I saw this huge theta, and honestly, it was one of the worst ones I've seen. I've seen so far. And then it started correlating with all the things that I have lived, since my childhood. That there was one time when I was a little kid and I was going to school and I forgot my backpack. And with all my books and, notebooks and everything. And I remember my mom being so upset about me leaving the backpack. And then now I can extend a little more grace to myself and be more gentle towards myself, saying, it is not 100% your fault. There is something else going on, and what happened was I was really into music, and that is something that also ADHD people have, that sometimes we find something that really interests us and we deep dive into it and then don't care about anything else. And I was really into playing the flute at that time, and I did not forget my flute, but I forgot my my backpack. So there are certain things, and I really thought that I just had bad memory, and this is where this data also plays a role, because this active theta and alpha, because alpha also helps us determine and theta and alpha about attention. So what aspects of your daily life do you pay attention to, and which ones of those experiences become long-term memory, right? So when you sleep, and then your experiences during the day become long-term memory, it also has to do with this. So people like me, because I have my working memory, which is the memory that you use. So if I give you a phone number to memorize right now, and then you can repeat it to me, my working memory is very poor. But it's also one of the symptoms of ADHD. That because for example, my long-term memory is excellent. I have excellent long-term memory. My short-term memory, I have a hard time memorizing things just very quickly. If I need to memorize something from one page and then jump to the other page, sometimes I have to go back and forth because I cannot remember. So it is just many different aspects. And then when I did the test, there are several tests that you have to do. I saw again that my concentration and reaction time for this test. So this is a Z-score, and basically 0 is average. So if you can be positive or negative on the Z-score. It just means you compare to the average. And mine was in -3, which is the lowest. So it's like less than 1% of the population, is 0.5% on one side, right? So so this is one of the reasons, and a lot of the tests demonstrated that, and along with my history, since I was a child, that it is present. I just didn't know, and this gonna help me realize, when I am trying to concentrate into doing a task that doesn't really interest me, I really am trying, but it is like climbing a mountain. And with this now, I understand, okay, I need to find a way that my brain is not producing so much theta, and then I need to move it a little bit more on to producing more beta, which is the wave that you produce when you're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to concentrate on something. So this was incredibly validating for me, and yeah.
Well, and the different states that are hard for each individual's brain to get into. I mean, I think we carry trauma around that, because I'm told I have a bad memory, or I'm told that I'm not good at emotional regulation, and then I get panicked about regulating emotion, and then that makes me explode, or the stress response makes the memory worse. And so a lot of this is maybe bringing that down to where people can just gently understand where their strengths and weaknesses are, and view it more holistically to improve.
Yes, and this is why I also had this little presentation just kind of to explain how this works. So the salience network is involved in attention and sensory information. So if we think about you're sitting on the chair and you are feeling the temperature of the room, you are seeing some input, you're listening to me, you look at the light. So there's a lot of sensorial information that we're receiving all the time. And the salience network, what it does is it helps us kind of discern what are the sensory inputs that needs the more attention, right? And the salience network is different. It works differently in people with autism and people with ADHD. So if for example, children with ADHD, with autism spectrum disorders, this network is hyper connected. So their network, their brain pays a lot of attention to sensorial input, right? So this is where the insula is. This is the anterior insula, and it is one of the hubs of this network. And then so when it's not working properly, so what is the role of this insula when this network is not working properly? So insula, what it does, it provides an emotion attached to an experience. So for example, you see fire for the first time and then you go and touch it, your feeling is you got hurt, so it's a negative emotion whenever you see fire because you got burned one time, right? So it kind of attaches to every experience that you have, especially since childhood. Every experience you have, an emotion is attached to it, and this is what the insula does, right? And then, for example, people that have damage to the insula, they have difficulty with sensory perception. So the sensory perception is not only the five senses, but you also have a perception of how our body is located into space, how we are positioned, and temperature, many different things, right? All of our body awareness. And also addictive behaviors, because when your insula also attaches positive emotion to a stimulus, then the brain usually tends to want to repeat that.
Can you teach the brain to not associate that positive thing with the neurostimulation technology?
You can teach the brain to associate it. It's just the brain for people with addictive behaviors. Usually, even when it's neutral, brain can detect a stimulus as positive, neutral, or negative. A lot of times when the stimulus should be neutral, it is associated with positive too in people with addictive behaviors. So there is almost no neutral, so you cannot try and calm down that part. And also they have problems forming successful social relationships. And the reason is because when you interact with, let's say, your caregiver when you're a child, and you tripped and fell, you got hurt, your caregiver will give you, a sense of comfort and calm. And some children that have been abused, they don't have that with their caregivers because they're also afraid of them. So also
an insecure attachment or reactive attachment.
Yeah, it also plays a role in there, depending on their attachment.
Your associations with intimacy may be negative, so you want it and you get close to someone and then you react badly.
Yes, or they're expecting a person, even when they meet someone, they're expecting that person to behave badly, even if they have shown they have not shown that they will behave badly, because that is our experience. Then we're expecting that, right? And then people with autism, their insula is not damaged; it just behaves differently. And there have been studies that demonstrates that it is hypoactive when it comes to social recognition. So and it is, and this is why people with autism sometimes they have difficulty reading people's emotions and understanding social cues. It is underpowered when it comes to that sensory input of social information, and it is hyperactive when it comes to sensorial information. So all the light and sounds, it really is very overwhelming for them, because it's a lot of input, and kind of your brain overflows with all this information and doesn't know what to do. And this is when you see all the tantrums that children with autism have, and it is because they truly are very overwhelmed. This is a lot of information to take on, and they basically go into fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what to do with all this information.
Mm-hmm.
So something that we can work on is that because they also have a decrease, we call neuronal habituation. So let's say if you enter a room for the first time, you look at everything, you look at the lights, you pay attention to many different things, but once you enter that room several times, it kind of becomes more normalized, and you don't notice many things about the room anymore, but you focus on one thing, right? Or whatever it is that you went to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? And people with autism, their amygdala is what controls also new experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So, and how you react to those new experiences. And for them, that insula with the amygdala connection is a little more active. So a lot of the times, even if it's a repeated input, their brain does not kind of normalize that input,
Mm-hmm.
but it is as if they were seeing it for the first time, or at least that's what some of the studies have shown. And our amygdala, again, helps us determine what is important to focus on, and then depending on the stimuli that we're receiving from our environment, then the amygdala will trigger a response to that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is where the amygdala is. Okay, so if the amygdala is overactive, the insula is overactive, signaling to the amygdala, then that a greater connectivity between the amygdala and the insula during resting state, it means that the amygdala will have a greater response to sensory input. And another thing is the amygdala also helps control our response with the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems. And then the way this works is that the amygdala will signal the hypothalamus when there is something that is frightening. It activates our sympathetic nervous system, and it is important because it is for our survival. So it's basically telling the brain go,
Mm-hmm.
and this is why you move out of the way. Okay, sorry, let me just save this. All right. Okay, I got the file
Mm-hmm.
to send to you. Okay, so for our stress response, so the autonomic nervous system, it will send the sympathetic response, and then our hypothalamus will release epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline,
Mhm.
and it will make our heart beats faster. And this is why if there is a car coming, you move out of the way, and you don't really think about it. It is a very automatic response,
Mhm.
and this is again, it's a stress response. But what a lot of people don't know is that the amygdala also has the power to calm you down after that stressful response has passed, and we call this is the parasympathetic system. So after your cortex deems something that it is a stimulus, that it is not dangerous, then your amygdala signals your hypothalamus to calm down, and everything is okay, and then the threat has passed. So for a lot of the people with autism, that they are receiving a lot of, it's a lot of sensory input, a lot of stress response. We're trying to calm that down. We're trying to trigger a little more this parasympathetic system to help them calm down, and that way when they receive that sensory information, and it is not so overwhelming, and their brain can process it better, and without going into that fight or flight.
Okay.
So what does neurotherapy does? We can help the brain produce those parasympathetic responses. When your brain has gone into that sympathetic response where you're stressed all the time, then their brain kind of goes into survival mode. It thinks that when you're very stressed, it thinks you're in danger all the time. And this is why people also with this kind of responses have a lot of difficulty sleeping. It has a lot of physiological responses. You can get high blood pressure, weight gain also, because when you are stressed, your brain is thinking, you know, I have to store all the energy I get because I'm not sure when I'm gonna use it. So you also store a lot of the food, the energy you get from food and fat, you store it in the body. Fat is just energy reserves. So increase the energy reserves. And then now with neurotherapy, we can activate the parasympathetic nervous system with very gentle magnetic stimulation, and it helps people process sensory input better. And you can see results within 6 to 7 sessions, usually on adults. Children, you can see it a little bit faster because their brains are so plastic still. And best part, it is medication free. So you don't need medication, and we have seen
Results in
lots of
6 or 7 sessions. Wow.
Yeah, it is something that you do one time, and once you're done with your sessions, and you're done with the treatment, and then that's all.
Well, thank you. So I'll cut that. I'll probably start with this and then take that into the interview with Jay. So like
Okay.
we'll start with the brain map and then do that in the middle, and then